For almost 40 years, there was this network of schools called CEDU. They promised this, revolutionary way to help troubled teens. But as we're about to see, behind its really inspiring philosophy was a story that was way more complex and controversial than it looked on the surface.
This was the heart of it all. See and do. That's actually what CEDU stood for. And I mean, on the surface, that's a pretty powerful and proactive message, right? It's exactly what you'd want to hear if you were looking for help for a struggling teenager.
So, the big question is, what did that philosophy actually mean day to day? To figure that out, we really have to go straight to the source. We're going to look at how CEDU described itself in its own internal documents, how that story changed over time, and what other people eventually revealed about what was really going on.
We're going to break this all down into 5 parts. First, we'll look at what CEDU claimed to be. Then, we'll dive into their core philosophy and methods, see how things evolved, and finally, unpack the very complicated legacy it left behind.
All right, so how did this whole thing get started? Let's begin with the official story, the one CEDU told everyone. So according to their own faculty handbook from 1990, here's the pitch. It was a specialized year-round boarding school. And it was for adolescents who were struggling, kids who needed a totally different kind of environment to get on track.
And man, did it grow fast. It literally started in the founders, Mal Wasserman's, home in Palm Springs. But by 1982, it had blown up into a multi-state operation with a whole other major campus up in Idaho.
So what was this core philosophy they were selling to all these desperate parents and new staff members? What was the secret sauce?
Okay, so take a look at this document from 1990. It lays out a philosophy they called experiential education. The whole idea, they said, was to stimulate the total child, focusing on real-world experience, not just sitting in a classroom.
And this program was built on a few key pillars. You can see it here. It went way beyond just math and English. The idea was to develop students physically, mentally, emotionally, even spiritually. They had emotional growth sessions, wilderness survival, and a huge emphasis on a strong work ethic.
Now this quote from the founder to his staff, this is where it gets really interesting. You are not the teacher, you are the lesson. What that meant was that the staff were expected to be total open books, using their own life stories, their own struggles as the main teaching tool.
Okay, let's talk about one of the most unique and central practices at CEDU. It was something they called a RAP. And this was basically the engine for that whole emotional growth curriculum we just saw.
In their own words, RAPs were these structured group sessions. The official purpose was to be a space where students and staff could, process their feelings, confront bad behavior, and learn how to communicate better.
And if you had any doubt about how important these RAPs were, check this out. This is a self-evaluation form for staff. These were not just casual chats. This was a core methodology. Teachers were formally graded on a scale of 1 to 5 on how well they could lead these incredibly intense sessions.
And the stated goals of a RAP, taken right from that form, followed a really clear procedure. First, you confront the bad behavior. Then, you get the student to have this big emotional release. The theory was that this would make them open to new ideas and ultimately new behaviors.
But then something started to shift. In just 5 years, between 1990 and 1995, the way CEDU talked about itself changed a lot. That small, philosophy-driven school was turning into something very different.
I mean, you don't even have to read the text to see the difference here. It's stark. On the left, you've got this typewritten, almost academic-looking statement of philosophy from 1990. Then on the right, from 1995, you have this slick organizational overview with a corporate logo and a totally polished, branded feel. And believe me, this change was way more than just a new logo. This organizational chart from 95 shows a much more formal corporate structure. You see clear divisions for operations, academics, the whole shebang.
So what's the bottom line here? The whole vibe changed, dramatically. The 1990 packet reads like this deep, philosophical explanation of a unique vision. By 1995, it's basically an operations manual for a growing business, the CEDU family of services.
So, okay, that's the story CEDU told about itself, a story of philosophy and growth, but that's only half the story. The external accounts, the research that came later, well, it painted a much, much darker picture.
Because of course, CEDU's carefully polished story didn't exist in a vacuum. As soon as former students and researchers started talking, a completely different version of the school started to emerge.
So it turns out multiple sources trace CEDU's methods back to this really controversial group called Synanon. And according to author Maya Shalavitz, Synanon was known for using these incredibly harsh techniques, like humiliation and hard labor to break people. And here's the kicker. CEDU's founder was a former member of Synanon.
So over the years, the organization faced just a flood of really serious allegations. Those raps that were supposed to be therapeutic, people started alleging they were just confrontational Synanon-style attacks, often led by totally untrained staff. There were also accusations of forced labor, isolation, even of faking high school credits.
It all came crashing down in 2005. Facing a mountain of lawsuits and intense regulatory pressure, the entire CEDU network of schools just collapsed. They closed their doors for good.
The story of CEDU really leaves us with this heavy question, doesn't it? It shows just how dangerously thin the line between tough love and straight-up abuse can be. And it makes you ask a question that's still really relevant today. Where do we draw that line, and who gets to decide?